Hello, family, and welcome to another episode of Mindset Shift, a space where we're here to have conversations that are supposed to do one purpose and one thing, which is to transform our minds. My name is Lindani, and I'll be your host as usual, together with speaker, leader, and author Anthony Rukanza. Over the past weeks, we've been talking about manhood. We've defined manhood, we've spoken about how it has rolled out within our society, we have defined how men can tap into the idea of manhood and can actively improve themselves. But we cannot talk about manhood without balancing out with what is happening within society and with our core existent members, should I say, for lack of a better word, which is women. And the equivalent of manhood is then therefore womanhood. So today we're going to have a thought-provoking conversation, and I trust and hope that this is not going to be a conversation that will be controversial, but rather is for the purposes of transformation. Tino,
yes,
welcome.
Sir. Thank you so much.
I already feel the weight of this conversation bearing on me.
Yeah.
First, because of the outlook in and of itself, two men speaking about women.
Yeah.
That's a tough one.
Yes.
I just want us to get straight into it.
Okay.
But last time when we started talking about manhood, we started by defining what manhood is, particularly to the biblical reference.
Yeah.
I'll start light. Is there a difference between a girl and a woman? And if there is a difference between a girl and a woman, what exactly is that difference?
All right, amazing. Thank you so much for that question. It's very important for us to understand that as we discuss these issues, we're supposed to go back to the standard of Scripture. Why is it important for us to go back to the standard of Scripture? Because Scripture is what defines the manual that is meant to order our steps in terms of who we are. When we discussed about manhood, the first thing that we did was we gave the scriptural reference.
Yeah.
Why did we do that? Because when a product has been made and manufactured for people, when you want to know about the product, you don't go to the people that have purchased the product, but rather you go back to the manufacturer. The manufacturer is the one who's meant to tell you that this cell phone was made with this intention and this is exactly what was supposed to happen. So similar things apply when we're discussing manhood, when we're discussing womanhood. We don't necessarily need to have a reference point of an individual that was created, but rather go back to the times of creation for us to have an understanding as to where it's coming from. So allow me to go back into Scripture so that I boil down to the question that you asked. The first thing that God does is God says, let us make man in our own image. Now, it's very interesting to suggest and to know that when he says man, the man that was defined there was not a male or a female, but man was rather the creation of a spirit.
Yeah.
So Genesis 1:26, when they say, let us create man in our own image, God there was talking about man who is the spirit. The spirit is basically what God created first, before he then created the body that spirit was going to be housed in. So when God says, let us make man in our own image, he made a gender-perfect spirit, which is a spirit that does not call itself or does not define itself by either male or by either female. So the dominion that is given there was a dominion that is given to this spirit that is called man. But this spirit was made in a realm where it cannot exist as a spirit in this physical realm, which means that when God made that image, yes, it was possible for that spirit to find expression within the spiritual realm, but it was impossible for it to find expression within the physical realm, which is earth. So when he wanted to place it on earth, he now needed to make a dirt body. Now, this body was supposed to then house that particular spirit that God had created. So when God creates the spirit, he places the spirit within Adam. When he places it within Adam, it means that every spirit that was going to house every single individual on earth, at that particular instance, was given to the man who was called Adam. So Adam has this entire spirit held in his body, and his body was now called male. So male was the dirt body that was going to house a spirit that was called man, and that male was going to host everything else that God had created and placed it within him. But there is a problem now, because everything that God has created is now found within Adam. But how is that going to be propagated so that the earth may be multiplied, which was the vision of God, that this entire earth be filled with the man, which was the spirit, but in different bodies so that they're able to propagate the will of God. So this is when God now says, for it is not good for man to be alone. And he now introduces a new dead body. And this body is what we call Eve, which was the female. So at that particular instance, you now have a man and you now have a female. And these two things are defined as male and they're defined as female. So your spirit is gender perfect. But the propagation of the will of God here on earth is not gender perfect, which means that the man was created as a male for a particular purpose, yet the woman was also created as a female for a particular purpose. So when we want to put these two into comparison, it is very false of us to put them into comparison because they were made for different purposes. Now, trying to compare a male and a female is equally as trying to compare a plane and a boat. They both serve the purpose of transportation, but the way in which they do it is different. So what we are supposed to have as a conversation is what is the difference between a male and a female. So when we want to know this difference, Lindani, we don't now go to a female and ask a female, what is it that makes you a female? Because a female is a product too. So we have to go back to the manufacturer and find out what is it that God says. So your point of saying is there a difference between a girl and a woman. They are both defined biologically by what they host. But what now separates a girl and a woman is their understanding of the purpose that they hold. Okay. So it's possible for you to be a 50-year-old female that is still a girl because of the immaturity of lack of understanding as to who you are and the role you're supposed to play within society. I think that's a good start.
Yeah. I mean, I agree. I agree with most that you have said exactly. That we ought to distinguish between the physical attributes that we have in terms of defining our identity, which is male or female, right? And in order for us to understand the differences between the girl and the woman, we have to understand the issues of purpose, right? And because you talk about purpose in manhood, we now want to talk about purpose in womanhood, and what that purpose actually looks like. So according to you, Timothy, and according to your biblical understanding, what is the purpose of a woman?
All right, fantastic. So to understand the purpose of a woman, we need to understand the environment in which the woman was placed so that she is able to propagate who she was.
Okay.
Now, when God creates the female, he does not do it haphazardly, but he only does it when certain things had been ticked. And through ticking these particular things, that was going to be an environment where a woman was going to thrive. So we need to understand what environment was created and how a woman was meant to thrive in that environment and how eventually that will bring out the woman in her. So the first thing that God does when he creates Adam is he gives Adam what we call his presence. I believe we spoke about this in previous episodes, where we said the first thing God creates or gives Adam was Eden. We speak about Eden and we say Eden was not a physical place, but rather Eden, if you look at it in the Hebrew context, it was a position upon which earth and heaven could interact at any given time, which means that when Adam is created, he is placed within the presence of God. So which means the perfect environment for us to start talking about womanhood should only exist where there is presence. So already you see that we already have a problem within society where we have so many ladies that are willing to go out of the presence of God to find a man and believe they can bring him into the presence to be changed. Already this is against what the idea of true womanhood was going to do. That's why thriving becomes a problem. So the first environment that a woman was given through what a man is given was the presence. The second thing that Adam is given after being given the presence was he was given work. So work was him understanding his purpose. So when we then come and talk about how a woman is a helpmeet, she can only be a thriving helpmeet when she finds the person she's meant to help doing something already. So when you find a man that is not doing anything in purpose, already it will not allow the woman to thrive. The third thing that the man is given instruction. Now, what is instruction, Lindani? Instruction is the way of order. Instruction is how things operate. Instruction is how things are supposed to go. So this is given to a man. Now, when the man is given presence, and the man is given purpose, and the man is given instruction, now the Bible now says, for it is not good for this man. Which man? The man that has purpose, the man that has presence, and the man that has instruction, to be alone. To be alone. And that is when a woman is now introduced. So a woman is introduced in an environment that has got presence, in an environment that has got purpose, in an environment that has got instruction. then the woman comes to submit in that environment. If that environment does not exist, because women have what we call a natural instinct to nurture what is already there. If they find presence missing, they come to worsen the already bad situation because that's their nature. They come to multiply what already exists. So a woman comes carrying an ability to multiply what is already present. So when we talk about submission, Lindani, is not a way to limit women. Is not a way to say that women are not important. But submission is the way of order of creation. Because when a man gets instruction from God, what he's passing on to the woman is not coming from him, it's coming from God. The reason why men have visions that are limiting the potential of women is because they never got those visions from God. So the only thing that then allows the woman to thrive as a woman is when she finds that environment, but it's coming from God. And when a woman decides to cut off the passage of information from God to men to herself, and she believes it can come straight from her, she has cancelled the ideal order of what God intended for humanity. So now we have women that believe that they are thriving into success, yet they are running away from what makes them a purposeful individual. So comparing a man and a woman, Lindan, is not an issue of equality. Comparing a man and a woman is an issue of purpose. It's similar to comparing a dog and a mop. These are two different entities that have been given two different methods. So when a man and a woman come joined together, now the Bible now says, let they be fruitful and multiply. So the earth can only then be propagated when this man has ticked his areas and the woman comes to thrive in that particular field. And thriving there is not a woman being told that she does not matter, but rather it's the perfect environment for the true her to come out. Otherwise, if she gets a different environment, even in her success, she will fail because she has missed purpose.
Right. I can already see, I understand where you're coming from.
Yeah.
I hear where you're coming from.
Yeah.
But understand, let me play devil's advocate for a moment.
Yeah.
Right. Put myself in most of women's shoes.
Yeah.
I can already find fault with most of the things that you're talking about there. Particularly the first being that you're defending a woman's purpose in conjunction and in contrast with a man. That you're only purposeful as far as a man has been able to achieve their purpose and their instruction from God. And that is already problematic for a lot of women because they're coming from a very patriarchal society, patriarchal world, where the man has been the propagator of their oppression, where the man has been the propagator of their suffering. Right? And so when a woman is hearing that, all they're hearing is, right, for the injustices that you have put me through in the past, by virtue of submitting, by virtue of not me being educated more than you, then therefore I should submit to you because I don't have any other alternative. And you're telling me that my purpose is to be your helper, my purpose is to come and submit to the instruction that God has given you. That is already problematic. We understand where I'm coming from. So, and then perhaps linking that to a question that might be very important for you to answer now is, right, given that most men have failed to find their instruction and most men have failed to find their purpose, right? And we've got women that are diligent in work more than a man is diligent in work. We've got women that are pursuing whatever area or field of study in excellence that they're pursuing. And they're thriving. They're getting the corporate jobs. They're running top tier Forbes 500 companies. They're doing well for themselves. Right? So how do you tell such a woman to go and submit in such an environment that is so chaotic?
All right, perfect. I need you to understand that when I speak of an environment where a woman is meant to thrive, it's not just particularly an environment where it's a husband and a wife. Remember, there are certain women that have grown up within a proper setup of what a family is supposed to look like, where they have a father who's already under the stewardship and the principles of who God is. And the father is meant to tick all these boxes that I've mentioned. Then we have the wife, and then now we have a young lady. A young lady grows up in such an environment, and this environment begins to work for who she is because women need both the nurturing aspect of a woman and they also need the leadership role of a man, which is why we talk about manhood before this episode. Then you have this woman who is already making it in life, submitting what she has managed to achieve to a man that has not found purpose. this becomes a problem already, Lindani, because men that have propagated the patriarchal nature that people think are not men that has found dominance. They are men that also don't understand what their manhood is supposed to be. We define manhood and we say you're supposed to sustain, we say you're supposed to protect, and we say you're supposed to provide. So particularly when this comes off from a wrong version of understanding what God said, then it ultimately becomes a problem, which is why I place the standard of the conversation we're having as to what did God say. So you may even understand that most men that have propagated their patriarchal nature that is meant to destroy women has come from a position of them not understanding what God said. But understand that the problem that has risen in society, Lindani, is most women now believe that in their rising, they are meant to disempower certain men from their position of being providers, from their position of being sustainers, from their position of being protectors, so that they are able to elevate themselves. Now, what you don't understand is when you disempower a man with the idea that you're empowering a woman, what you are providing within society, you are providing weak men that are eventually going to be fathers to the next girl children, which is also going to be a problem to the woman because a woman is not going to be in an environment that is going to help her. So what I'm saying now is if a woman is successful, her submission point should come from a man that is in the same direction to where she's going. She cannot have the results of cosmos and want to submit that to a man that he himself does not understand manhood. Because remember, when we speak of manhood, we say that when a man and a woman are conjoined together, there is something that makes them one without them having to define certain roles, because these people are compatible. So when you find a woman that has achieved certain things and trying to fit in with a man who's not compatible, then now we have a problem. And just to address that nature, Lindani, being a success in terms of what society has defined does not make you a success in terms of what God has asked you to become. So it's possible for you to gather, amass wealth, and still fail as your position of what a woman is supposed to become. And your problem and you blaming the lack of men for your position is exactly what we are trying to define to say that that is why manhood matters. Because you're going to realize that some of these people, Lindani, that have amassed their wealth and cannot submit to a man, they grew up not seeing the position of a true man, a true father. So it becomes difficult for them to be able to put that underneath a man. Because when we talk of submit is you placing your mission under another mission. And what is the mission that a man is supposed to hold? It's the mission coming from God. So your inability to submit is less to do with what men are doing, but more to do with failing to understand that God is the one that can give a man a vision. Then you submit to that. So the true question becomes, is it your inability to submit to a man, or is it now your inability to submit to God?
Okay. The way that you're putting it,
Yeah.
and from the lens of how I'm understanding you, is that it's little to do with the capabilities of a man,
Yeah.
but more of to do with your instruction of a woman to be able to submit, and the belief that God has given a man in your life a vision that you can be able to submit.
Yeah.
And that is true. That is most definitely true. But then the follow-up question then becomes, right, in such a setup where you are telling them to submit to such a man who has been instructed by God to have a vision,
Yeah.
etc., which we discussed it in manhood,
Yeah.
about what the true vision ought to be for a man and how it's built.
Yeah.
Right? Don't you think, therefore, that it's the inability of men to tap into their idea of manhood, of what God has instructed to be a man, to then sustain such women that are upcoming, that are rising, that are doing very good things for themselves? For example, I've always believed that the recent spikes in the divorce rate is because men have not been taught to be socialized to deal with an empowered woman.
Okay.
Right?
Okay.
So because you've not been taught to socialize to deal with an empowered woman, because your masculinity is so fragile that you see an empowered woman as a threat
Yeah.
to your masculinity.
Yeah.
Therefore, all these problems and challenges arise.
Yeah.
Right? So talk to the woman that is in such a scenario. She's hyper successful. The likes of Oprah,
Yeah.
the likes of Emma Grade.
Yeah.
Those are highly successful women, multi-billion-dollar empires, and
Yeah.
it takes certain character and certain level of hard work to work twice as hard.
Yeah.
Then men have to work to
Yeah.
be able to reach such heights of
Yeah.
success. So I want you to talk to such women, such a young girl who aspires to be there,
Yeah.
but fears that perhaps if I reach such levels, and I've heard many women say, if I become too successful, how do we consider that?
Remember, our conversation is about addressing issues within society, of which I believe most of the things that we're talking about were addressed in terms of the manhood aspect. But another thing that I keep emphasizing on is, as a successful woman, I will repeat my standard of saying that your success in cosmos has nothing to do with the purpose God has for you. So no matter how big you become as a woman, there is still an institutional, purposeful, factual idea that God has already set, regardless of where you stand. Look at most of the successful women. One of their major challenges is not necessarily the area of success, but it's the area of sustaining the environment of a marriage, even when a man is unable to do the things you're supposed to achieve. To show you how these things differ, let's give scriptural reference. A prophet by the name of Hosea is told by God to go and take a prostitute. And God says, go and marry that prostitute. Now, these are people that, in terms of their nature, they are diabolically opposed. But because of the vision God has given Hosea, God shows how taking a woman who is a harlot is part of propagating the vision that he had to show the children of Israel what they were doing to him. So understand now that the vision that is given to a man is the only thing that can then define how crazy his decisions come from there. So it goes back to the fact that, did the man hear what God said? And is he able to propagate it with women? One of the most amazing marriages that I watched growing up was between Queen Elizabeth and I believe it was Prince, the husband, I'm just forgetting the name. Now, she was one of the most successful women at that particular time. And yet the man still needed to be the man in that particular environment, to a point that they actually argued for years the surname that the children were supposed to take, because royalty was coming from her side. But you understand that when she falls in love with a person that at that particular time was not of royal standard, which is why you see that at that particular time, kings had to marry women that were also in a royal family, so that the royal nature is going to be sustained. When you then find love outside of what was already preset, it means that you're still going to have to fight the certain things that nature has already said, that a woman is meant to submit the vision that she has to a man. So the issue is little to do with the success that the women have, but it has more to do to say, are you able to sustain back to the precedents that God has already set for women to be able to propagate? Which is why you find out that most successful women, although this is going to be a controversial statement, they are unable to stay within marriage. And it's not really an issue to do just with the men being unable to be the leader, but it's also the inability of a woman to then submit that full success to a man that she feels has not achieved what she has achieved.
Okay. Understandable. I get you. But the people that you really need to convince and the people that really need to listen to you, let's hope that they do not misquote you and they don't get you for saying that. But let's make the conversation a bit more interesting.
Yeah.
Do you believe that a Christian can be a feminist?
That I believe, huh?
A Christian can be a feminist.
All right, so we need to understand where the feminist movement started. It started on the foundation of saying that women were meant to be given opportunities, of which even on scriptural standard, women are meant to get opportunities, which is why I first said that when God creates man, which is the spirit, that spirit goes into different bodies, but that spirit has the same purpose, which means that women are still supposed to be able to propagate work and propagate opportunities. But what happened along the course of the feminist movement was a radical nature that ignored what it was meant to achieve. And it got to a point where there was now comparison between the man and the woman, which is exactly what I spoke about. That when you push a movement on the standard of saying that you are putting comparison in terms of what a male and a female are doing, eventually what you're going to realize is that one person between the two has to rise whilst the other is falling. So the radical nature of this movement got to a point that if a woman is to rise, it means somewhere a man has to fall. And the falling of the men was now to show that we are able to do it. When you find yourself as a woman doing everything that you're trying to do just to prove that you can do what a man can do, you're already submitting to the idea that you are lower than the man. Because you are pushing your passion to become a successful person based on what another individual that has been created by God is doing. That is a sign of showing that you're insecure about your reality. You don't understand the position that you're supposed to take. So the feminist movement started on a good ideology, but it has been perpetuated to heights that were not supposed to be achieved. And this has happened because it was started on the right values, but the moment it diverted from what scripture has set as a standard, it was never going to work in this particular society. The Proverbs 31 woman, Lindani, was defined as a woman that was supposed to work. One of the things that is defined within the Proverbs 31 woman is she's industrious in nature, which means that she was meant to work. So one of the things that are supposed to be qualities in terms of the women we are supposed to be finding as men are women that are able to work. These are women that are able to multiply that which they have, and they're able to push it in terms of producing more. Which is why I'm against this idea that most women believe that a man should always play the role of becoming a provider, and they lose their mind in terms of the position that they're meant to play in terms of propagating the vision that a man already holds. We find a marriage that was very powerful between King Ahasuerus and Queen Esther. Most of the things that happen in that kingdom to propagate the will of God came from the woman and not the man. But the woman did not dishearten the heart of a man simply because he was the king and she was the queen. Another area that the Proverbs 31 woman speaks about, it's wisdom. Most of the things that are happening in society is simply because certain women are not wise enough to understand the role that they're supposed to play in terms of the success that is required within the society. Just 2-3 days ago, I was watching a conversation between feminists. And the conversation that they were having is they were talking about how dressing is not supposed to be done according to the weakness a man has, but rather dressing is supposed to be done according to how comfortable a woman is. Now, when you go to the Proverbs 31 woman, she is defined as one who's able to package herself in a way that is attractive from those that look. So understand, Lindani, that when you package yourself as a see-through sweet, understand that people are only going to eat you as to the basis of your sweetness, and the moment it's gone, they're going to leave you. But when you package yourself as something that is meant to be kept, ideally you're going to attract that which is going to keep you as a woman. So already we are talking about industrious woman. We're talking about a woman that has got wisdom. We're talking about a woman that is able to package herself in terms of where she's going. And you understand in Proverbs 31 that that woman is working equally as a man is working. But the standard of the man being the leader of a house does not change. So what I'm simply showing you there, Lindani, is the inability for women to strive has now been connected also to how men are being disempowered in their journey up. Yet the idea was simply to push women in terms of understanding the position they are meant to work in terms of work. Giving works for both men and women. Seeding works for both men and hard work is for both men and women. But it should never be defined by the roles of gender. But rather, as it propagates, it should be taken back to the ideal family. That has got the man as a leader, a woman submitting, but both of them striving.
Okay. You talk about the idea of men playing the provider role in relationships, and I want to take us back and in terms of what exactly is happening in the current stage, in the relationship between a man and a woman, particularly in the courting stage. Right? There's a lot of responsibility that is placed, particularly on men, proving themselves worthy to be able to date maybe this beautiful woman that they see, right? For example, when it comes to issues of taking out a woman, you have to pay the expenses, do everything that you have to do. The upkeep, they'll tell you that I don't date a man that is not making, for example, north of, maybe let's say give or take 2,000 for this particular equipment. North of 2,000. They'll tell you that I'm not going to date a man who's not driving a car because it shows that you're not man enough, because our manhood has been tied up to our material benefits or our material abilities, right? So because of such a dynamic, and it has evolved so bad that is the metric at which women choose men, right? I'd like to believe that it might have not been so in the back in the day.
Yeah.
I know of a couple of relationships that have been functional, that have worked, when a woman would see the potential of a man and decide to bet on it, even if the woman was doing far better than the man.
Yeah.
So here's what I'm trying to ask is, I want you to address such a circumstance in the scenario, maybe to diagnose it. What exactly is going on within our society as far as dating is concerned, as far as this courtship is concerned? Is it the right metric to have propagating, or, there is an alternative, or there's a way out? And if so, what is that way out? And how can we design and go back to the standard of what dating ought to look like and what it ought to achieve?
That's perfect. So you understand that for most people, because of ideological inconsistency, you realize that certain women, they'll set a standard to say, I will not date a man who does not drive or a man who does not have money. And we believe that that is a conversation that is being sparked by a standard. But rather, it's a conversation that is being sparked by fear. Now, we have so many women that have grown up within households where even their fathers could not drive. Their brothers do not have everything they are asking from a man. And then the moment she gets into a dating phase, she believes that the man who comes to get her is meant to drag her out of the place of poverty. So you find that most women that actually have these unrealistic standards, if you go back to where they grew up, those things are not even there. A woman is going to tell you that you should drive, and yet the father doesn't drive. A woman is going to tell you that you should work, and yet the brothers don't have jobs. It's because she has grown up in an environment where she also does not understand what men are supposed to become. But this was also derived from the dowry system. This is where some of these things came from. The dowry system, Lindani, when it was started, was if a man is a good man and a man has a wife and they have had a child who's a woman, they are bringing up this child within an environment that has got at least minimum of a good life. When a man is coming to pay dowry to the father, the dowry was meant to say to the man that you have been keeping your daughter at this standard, and I'm coming to match your standard to say that I'm not going to allow your daughter to fall based on the standard that you've already created. Now, this standard was not just materialistically, but this standard was also mental. There was an idea of maturity that came with that. So even a man was able to know that if a man does not have maybe the physical amassing of wealth that he's supposed to have, but has the mindset and has the vision in terms of how this thing is achieved, he would still allow that man to be able to come and take the daughter. But understand that the kind of idea that we have in the dating phase now is more on a materialistic point and not on a point of, are you going to be able to have a vision and take us somewhere? Because when a woman says, I'm not going to take a man that does not drive, there is a man that is driving, but that man has no value to respect you. So you're going to grow in an environment where money is there, but there's no respect for who you are as a woman. Because a man that is going to raise a hand at a woman is a man that feels that the woman didn't bring anything, and the only thing she's able to provide is sex so that they can be children. So you find out that women don't understand that by them setting unrealistic standards, they are also subduing themselves in the hands of men that may not have the standard of what true manhood is. And understand also, Lindani, that most women, the thing that they hold dear to them is their virginity. They hold that so dear that they are willing to keep that until they enter marriage. The reason they are willing to keep it until they enter marriage is they say that this is the biological value that I have as a woman, so I'm supposed to keep it, which is very good and it's very true, because scripture makes it true to us that the only bed that is undefiled is the marriage bed. But Lindani, this is a nature that is coming to women. But there is also a nature that comes to men. Men have the nature to provide. Men have the nature to protect. Men have a nature to sustain. What are they meant to provide, sustain, and protect? They are supposed to do to what is theirs. Because if they provide, sustain, and protect what is not theirs, they are raising a woman for another man. And that is not right, and it's inconsistent with what true standard was supposed to become. So if a woman is willing to say that I am holding my virginity biologically for my value, then a man should be strong enough to also hold his sustenance, his protection level, and his provision level to a point where he is also now sure that where he is going is good. Because a man was told to invest and a woman was told to invest too. So if a man has to invest the money that he has simply because it is a standard for you to do the hair, the nails, and make the woman look good, You are making it look good so that other men can also see this is good. And until they take it away from you, then it becomes a problem. So we need to understand that the dating phase was never supposed to weigh whether you are able to match a standard that I don't have. But the dating phase was meant to weigh whether there is a vision that I'm able to sustain or submit to. So already when you find a woman looking for these materialistic possessions, it's already a problem because she is now trying to define herself outside what was meant to be there. So if we're going to have a society that is going to protect women in terms of keeping their biological sense, let's have a society that also protects men from keeping their destiny. Because when I spend on you, I'm not spending simply for me to get something, but I'm spending for me to propagate my destiny. So that has to be corrected.
What you have just said, let's hope it won't get you into deep trouble. Let's hope that you don't have a girlfriend, because I'm sure after this, you're definitely ending up single. So, because of time, we'll have to wrap our conversation right
Yes, sir.
now and right here. Thank you very much, family, for listening. Here are my two nuggets from this conversation. One, that I am financially celibate going forward. I'm joking. But I think I've learned a lot from what Anthony has said towards the biblical idea of what manhood, of what womanhood is and what it ought to be. And in reference to manhood, my position as a man towards the relationship that I ought to have with our members and our counterparts, which are women, right? And I'm sure that women have to listen to this conversation, not with an idea of attacking, but with an idea to want to learn and understand the thoughts that have been propagated through this conversation for the sole purpose, as we say in Mindset, to transform the mind. Right? Thank you very much for watching. Catch us on the next episode of Mindset Shift. Cheers.